It is a warm fall afternoon in Santiago, and my friend Ava and I are leaving the clinic to make some home visits. I have only been a volunteer at the clinic for a few months, so Ava is going with me. There are 6 million people in Santiago, many of whom live in urban shanty towns surrounding the city. So there is no way I'm going to find these homes without Ava's help. We take off in her old battered car, and I practice the questions I'm going to be asking in Spanish, and she patiently corrects my grammar. I'm doing interviews with families about the health needs of their children. Ava and I have become very good friends over these past months, visiting these families. Each person has moved us to tears, their incredible strength and courage. After about an hour, we finally arrive at the small wooden home in a shanty town on the very northern edge of the city. It feels like we're almost in the campo, or the countryside. As we approach the house, I notice a small garden and children running around playing tag outside. A middle-aged woman waves us into the unpaved driveway and warmly welcomes us with the Chilean typical kiss on the cheek. Hola, yo soy Ofelia. Hi, I'm Ofelia, she says. And we thank her for agreeing to spend this time with us. Inside her home, we sit in a cramped but orderly living room, and she offers us tea and delicious homemade Chilean bread. There are black and white photos on the walls. I can't bring myself to ask, but Ava asks her lovingly, "Is this your husband?" "Sí, yes, it is." And this must be your daughter-in-law and your son." "Yes," she says. "And this must be your daughter." "Sí," she says very sadly. And this is why we are here. 4 members of her family have disappeared, including her husband, her son, her daughter-in-law, and her daughter. They've all disappeared under the military dictatorship, and she is now left caring for her grandchildren. Ofelia is loving and patient with my Spanish as I ask her about how the clinic can better serve her needs. We spend the afternoon talking, and Ava and I have to work very hard to fight back our tears. Ofelia is so strong and warm, and the whole time we're talking, she keeps an eye on the children playing outside. When we finish, we give her big hugs, thank her profusely, and say goodbye. Ava and I walk to the car, she starts the engine, and we start slowly driving away in silence. Just then I see Ofelia running after us, one hand in the air and the other holding something in her apron. Ava stops the car and we roll down the windows and she says, "Olvidé de entregarles unas paltas. I forgot to give you some of the avocados from our trees." I get out of the car to thank her and give her another hug. Ava and I drive around the corner, stop the car, and cry. That afternoon with Ofelia was 31 years ago, during the very first year that I lived in Chile. When I was thinking about the message that I wanted to bring to you today, I look back over these 3 decades, and I'm overwhelmed with memories of the struggles, examples, and aspirations of the people I work with and love and admire in Chile. During the brutal military dictatorship, over and over I saw the love and generosity of the people most affected by the ruthless repression, people like Ofelia. These were years of incredible fear, but they were also years of courageous mothers and heroic deeds. Bonhoeffer wrote that only a suffering God can help. In Chile, we see the risen Christ in the struggles of the people for liberation and justice. In 1981, my first year in Chile, I was volunteering at a clinic for people who suffered political persecution under the dictatorship. During the dictatorship, which lasted 17 years, thousands of Chileans were murdered by their own government, and thousands more were imprisoned, tortured, forced into exile, or made to disappear, never to be heard of again. The leaders of the clinic had asked me if I would interview care providers of children whose parents had disappeared to better identify what services they need. That task changed my life. A year after our visit with Ophelia, based on my volunteer work at the clinic, I wrote and presented a project to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Chile to train community health promoters. Much to my surprise, they liked the project, and soon I was in New York interviewing for a global mission position with the Lutheran Church. And a few months later, I was back in Chile starting the health project. We began EPES, the health project of the Lutheran Church in Chile, as a response to the challenge to share in Christ's ministry of healing and wholeness in a world of great suffering. Our goal was to improve the health conditions in urban shanty towns and squatter settlements through the organized participation of the people themselves. Under the military, basic health services deteriorated rapidly, and many organizations were outlawed. For the past 31 years, the EPES Health Ministry has been helping low-income women and their families develop skills for collective action. At the core of our strategy has been a program to train community health promoters. Groups of 10 and 15 women, a couple men in there too, brave men who take on the challenge of working for health in their communities. These women receive technical and practical assistance in health promotion. EPES always starts by listening to the community. We don't come in with a predetermined plan. We start with methodologies that help the communities themselves define their problems. Even after the massive earthquake in 2010, which I'm sure you remember, 8.8 on the Richter scale, when we worked in the emergency camps and in 27 communities along the coast, one of the very first things we did was to furnish an emergency wooden shelter with tables, chairs, and a teapot, so people would have a place to gather to tell their stories about the earthquake, to figure out their needs, and organize for the long-term plan of rebuilding. Often in our rush to help people, we neglect to consult the people most in need. EPE's approach over these 31 years has always been to start by listening, and then support and offer training and accompaniment to the local leaders and communities. Among the issues addressed over these years are diseases caused by poverty, violence against women, and as new challenges have emerged over these years, EPES began training teams to address issues like HIV/AIDS at a time when few spoke aloud about it in Chile. And more recently, the earthquake and tsunami recovery, reproductive health, breast cancer, nutrition, and tobacco use. When we started to train health promoters, we realized we would need to spend a lot of time motivating women to participate. We always spend many hours visiting with people in their homes, having coffee, making them feel comfortable with us. So many times we really have to encourage women that they do have the skills to participate. Society has told poor women over and over how unimportant they are, how undervalued they are, what nobodies they are. I remember visiting the home of Senora Lucha years ago. She was very reluctant to participate. She told us shyly, looking down at the ground, "No, yo nunca terminé el colegio. I never finished high school. I can't read very well. I really don't think I can participate. What could I possibly contribute?" Well, we did convince her to come to the course, and she became an active member of the health team. 2 months later, I was visiting that group when they were doing an activity in the open market in their community. And there, walking through the open market, was Senora Lucha with an armband, a megaphone, shouting, "Vecinos y vecinos, neighbors, we need to get organized to stop the outbreak of rats." I went over and hugged her, and I said, "You're right, you really don't have what it takes to be a health promoter." And she and I laughed and hugged. We see God at work when the poor begin to believe in themselves as they discover their own sense of dignity and worth. The Jesuit priest Gregory Bowl, who works with gang members in Los Angeles, states, that the measure of our compassion is not our service, but our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with others, and to stand by those whose dignity has been denied, the readily left out, the disposable in our societies. To stand and obliterate once and for all the sense that some lives matter less than others. A moment I will never forget in these past 31 years was when we were working with a group of women who collect seaweed along the coast. These women had lost everything after the tsunami, and they were living in small wooden homes right against the sea, and they were trying desperately to get back to work. We organized and helped them buy wheelbarrows and boots. And as we were celebrating, we had some coffee and somebody brought some cookies, and one of the women, Mercedes, said to us, "Oh, we have a question for you. We've been wanting to ask you this all year." And then she turned to Lautaro, the physician who directs our staff in Concepcion, and said, "Well, why do you care so much about us? Why do you care so much about us? Didn't you realize that we're nadies? Didn't you realize that we're nobodies?" And he threw his head back and laughed, and he said, "What wonderful nobodies. You're the nobodies who helped protect this community after the tsunami. And here you are, these amazing nobodies, helping feed your children by collecting seaweed and getting back to work." EPES work, like Gregory Boyle's in Los Angeles, aspires to broaden the parameters of our kinship. We are honored and grateful to work with these amazing nobodies, these amazing women. In Jesus, we see the heart of what a life full of God is like: kindness, compassion, and justice. Jesus' life and message continues to remind us of what God asks of us in Micah 6:8. As followers of Jesus, we are called on a journey of transformation to share fully what it means to be human in the midst of concrete suffering. The path of discipleship is not an individual path, but rather involves being together in community, a community that remembers and celebrates the living Christ and seeks to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. We maybe are not all called to cross the world or to visit prisons, but we are all called to act justly. Anywhere in the world, to act justly often demands courage. Situations of injustice often have to do with lack of power. To act justly means refusing easy solutions and looking for those long-term just answers for the people who have been left out. Today, with your generous support, EPES annually reaches over 100,000 women and their families locally in poor communities through training, organizing, and mobilizing for collective action. We've seen many of the health promoters over these years go back and finish high school, and some have even gone on to college. Last year, during our 30th anniversary, that my mother came down with my 4 siblings to help us celebrate, Valeria Garcia, one of the early health promoters, decided to write and speak about her experience. When we recruited her back in 1984, she was an unemployed mother of 3 living in a dusty urban shanty town in Santiago. In her testimony, she writes, "From my very first contact with EPES, I was impressed with how our knowledge and skills, the knowledge and skills that we already had, were respected and incorporated into the health promoter training. This approach treated us as adults, not as children, and that made a huge difference to us. My training as a health promoter changed my life, transformed my community, and helped us transform our whole society." After being a leader of the health teams for over a decade, she sought her high school diploma, and with the support of EPES and the Lutheran Church, went on to obtain a university degree in psychology. As a woman in her 40s in a very class-divided society, from a poor shantytown, she faced many, many barriers to studying at the university. During the first year she was there, she told me that a young woman who arrived at the university in a very fancy car and treated her with great disdain, one day approached her and said to her, "What are you doing here at the university? Why don't you study something you could actually finish?" Valeria said she had to be loving towards these people, to not fill herself with bitterness. She kept a journal. A few years later, she ended up tutoring that young woman in statistics. Today, Valeria directs a city government program larger than EPES, dealing with domestic violence, child safety, and other issues affecting her low-income community where she continues to live. When she shops in the open market there, they call her the psychologist of the people. Her example influenced so many other health promoters. Many started going back to high school, and some even went on to college, as she did. So many times I have heard people say, if Valeria can go to college, I can do this, whatever this may be. Her 3 daughters have followed close behind her process of growth. All 3 of them are finishing degrees in psychology or law at the university. We've seen many of the children of the health promoters go on and finish high school and college. And while it is true that Valeria is an exceptional woman, in God's sight, all people are exceptional. In the slums, reservations, shanty towns, refugee camps, and squatter settlements live millions of exceptional women, men, and children waiting for an opportunity to develop and share their talents and gifts. As we look back over these complex, challenging, and wonderful years, our staff in Chile is filled with deep emotion and gratitude for the many congregations like yours that have accompanied us on this journey of health, justice, dignity, and wholeness. Through cards, letters, emails, visits in both directions, we hope you'll think about including us on your next visit internationally. We've had Skype calls, and we're always aware and remembering each other in our prayers. We've built deep relationships of mutual friendship and support that have been key to EPES and our sustainability over these past 31 years. Today, we're aware that the relationship between churches and communities in the North and South is not one of giver and receiver, but rather of equal partners and companions in God's mission. A term that emerged from Latin America expresses well the new model for mission as being one of accompaniment, of walking together in a common cause of justice and service to humanity. As we move forward in our 4th decade, we have exciting new opportunities before us. To just mention one, this January, with 2 community health promoters and a member of our staff, we'll be training community health workers in rural villages in Kenya. This September marks the 40th anniversary of the US-funded military coup in Chile. And Ofelia, who is now in her 80s, along with thousands of others, continue to seek justice and truth about their loved ones. The brutality of the dictatorship left many Chileans and their loved ones with deep wounds that have yet to heal. But I'm very proud to say that the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Chile played a fundamental role in the defense of human rights over these past 4 decades, and continues to be a strong supporter for the rights and dignity of all people. So I ask you to remember in your prayers Ofelia, Lucha, Mercedes, Valeria, and thousands of others in Chile who continue to seek truth and justice and to work for a healthy, more dignified life for all. I thank you so much for walking with us on this journey, for helping to broaden the parameters of our kinship and caring for the lives of the poor in Chile in the spirit of Micah 6:8 and of Jesus. And we hope you continue to walk with us as we take on these new challenges. I wish you the best in your lives and your work. Que Dios les bendiga. God bless you.